Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 28th episode this week, where we will be recapping the Patriots' 2021 defense and looking at some potential offseason moves on the defensive side of the football. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats300LevelPod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day. So, Kevin, for Patriots defense this past year, definitely some ups and downs. We saw some really good games, like when they played the Chargers and played the Browns. We saw some horrendous games, like when they played the Bills the last two times, and then the Cowboys. What was your overall thoughts on the defensive side of football as a whole?
I think the overall thought was that the defense was very similar to how the 2019 Patriots played, where they started off, well, in this instance, they didn't really start off great against the run, but after they kind of hit their stride, they were doing pretty well, held their own. They actually looked like a top defense in the league. And I think that was why a lot of people were thinking they could be heavy playoff favorites, where they can kind of go into and beat a few teams in a few different rounds by how good their defense was playing, how much pressure they were getting up the middle and through the edge. And then that was able to help kind of their corner play. And then we kind of saw when it got to the end, it kind of fizzled out. And it's the same sort of thing that happened in 2019, where we saw a lot of people not playing in the right positions, a lot of the older players kind of losing steam towards the end of the season. And I think that's the same sort of thing that we saw here. And they underperformed by a big amount near the end.
Yeah, for me, I think I see the 2019 comparison, but I think it's actually a little more towards 2017, where they were at least scoring defense, they were one of the best in the league. I think this year they were second, maybe third after the Buffalo game in the regular season. But they performed well, but it was a lot of the bend, don't break defense, where they're giving up some yards here and there, but when you need a stop, they'll get a stop. Except there are a lot of games this year where they actually needed a stop and they didn't, but that's besides the point. But then like the floodgates just swung wide open in the Super Bowl in 2017. And it was this year where, like you said, they started off inconsistent, some really good games, Tampa early on, but then terrible against the Cowboys a couple weeks later. Then it seemed like they got their stride during that 7-game winning streak. And then something just at the bye, I don't know what happened. I don't know if they got overconfident or they just got exposed. Teams figured out how to stop them or score on them. And it's tough for me to kind of grade how they were, because there were those inconsistent games. There were those games where they actually did shut the teams down, but there were those other games where they couldn't get a stop at all. So it was just inconsistent. It's the only way I can really sum up the whole season.
Yeah. I think one of the things that came true towards the end of the season is something that we had said during that winning streak, was that if teams were able to shut down Barmore and Matthew Judon, they would have some problems. The Patriots defense would have some problems because their secondary wasn't good enough to cover for that long. They really only had JC Jackson, where he's a pretty good corner, but it's only him. You don't have Jonathan Jones because he was hurt. You have Miles Bryant, who I think is a pretty good player, but he's not the caliber of Jonathan Jones. And then Mills actually played decently well compared to what I was expecting him to do, but he's not a great man corner. So those things kind of really expose them as well too, where they're not getting pressure, and if they don't get pressure, zone defenses get ripped apart, and that's the big thing.
Yeah, and along those lines is Barmore still was able to get some production, but the thing that gave the Patriots defense so much success early on was it was both Barmore and Judon getting production. Mm-hmm. But then Judon, just the last 5-6 games of the 7 games of the season, was just absolutely horrendous. So he said he was hurt, but wasn't something that needed surgeries. Hopefully just rest. I don't know if he got worn down from just being so productive early on, but that's just something that maybe the Patriots should try. And if it was just being worn down, maybe monitor his snaps early on next year, so same thing doesn't happen.
Yep. And he also mentioned too that he needs just to be in better shape going into the season. So that's, I think, one of the big things why he wore down. And the other thing too is he's playing on pretty much every snap. He was playing on special teams. And do you really need him on special teams to be playing all those snaps? I think they may just need to maybe cut back how much they're using him if they want to have him fresh for the end, and that's when it's most important. Kind of going down into the positional groups, kind of how we did last week, kind of breaking down how we kind of seemed how yeah. Excuse me, breaking down how we kind of graded each position and kind of what the offseason may look like. Are there any potential cuts, any potential free agents we may think that they might want to sign? Because again, free agency starts basically on Monday. Monday is the tampering period, the 14th. Free agency starts the 16th, but I think we know all well that all of those deals get announced at the start of tampering. So
I think like a lot of the Patriots deals last year were announced the first day of tampering.
Yep. So we'll probably get to hear pretty much everything that's going down on Monday. And again, I don't expect them to be major players this coming free agency, how it's usually been most years past. So we'll probably have a pretty quiet time for us covering the Patriots.
Yep.
So Eric, I think the first one would just be the edge play. How do you kind of grade how they did, and what do you think their potential cuts or needs, potential players they might try and grab?
I'm going to start with this one, and I feel like for a lot of positions, it's going to be the same. It's tough for me to really give a grade because of how inconsistent, or if one person at a position was good, but the others weren't. So this, I'm going to give a B based on Judon's first 2/3 of the season, his production, where he was in the running. At least we were saying he should be in the running for defensive player of the year. We didn't think he was going to get it, but how productive he was, he should at least be considered, how dominant he was. And then he just wore down. But then the other side wasn't really able to get much production at all. Uche did well the first 2 games, but then after his injury, he was never the same. I thought that there was going to be that 1-2 punch on both edges, but he was a disappointment this year. Dietrich Wise was horrendous when he was at edge. Minus, I think there's one game he actually played good, but other than that, he wasn't good. So that's why I give it a B, but that's mostly only because of Judon's first 2/3 of the season. Some potential, I don't really see many cuts from the edge, unless you consider Winovich as an edge instead of outside linebacker. I think Winovich could be cut or traded, just depending on roster spots. And since, even though he was your sack leader in 2020, he barely saw the field on defense in this past season. So unless they think they can get more out of him, I think he's going to be on his way out. One interesting one I know we both talked about on Twitter a lot today is Trey Flowers. He was released today. I could see the Patriots trying to get him back. Only thing with that is they have been playing a lot more of a 3-4 style defense, and he's more of that 4-3 edge. So I don't know if he's really going to fit the system, but they do like him a lot. He was very productive with the Patriots, and I don't think he's going to cost you that much, or at least comparative to other defensive ends. So he might be someone just to keep an eye on, and maybe they switch back to a 4-3 defense, especially if they get Jordan Davis in the draft, which I don't think he'll be available, but
yeah, I think this one I'm going to go with a B minus, and I think that may even be a little bit too generous. And again, Matthew Judon was kind of an all-pro the first 12, 13 games of the season. Was on pace to set the record amount of sacks for the Patriots, and faded very fast throughout the end of the season. And then on the other end, Dietrich Wise, I'm not a fan of him. I think I am a fan of him if he's playing in the right position, and I don't think he's positioned right in this defense. He's not a 3-4 type of player. He isn't bad in those sub packages when they're needing to get pressure, and he can kind of get pressure that way. But just holding up on the edge himself, that's not that type of player for him. And then again, Uche, I think, really needs to get some playing time this coming season. I think he was we'll kind of get to this. It all depends on how you kind of focus him and Winovich, what you kind of classify them as, edge or outside linebacker. Because I think he was kind of caught behind Van Noy in this situation, and even Winovich too. And I think I'll just get into them now, just because I don't know how we're really classifying these players. But Winovich, I think they'll probably end up trading him. I do think that he did show some promise at middle linebacker,
Yeah.
especially in that Ravens game
Yep.
back in 2020. And I don't understand why they don't want to put him there. From what the reports are, they don't trust him about having the right assignments and following through and making sure that they're playing the right coverage. So I can kind of get that, but he's talented enough to play linebacker, and he's a little undersized for edge or outside. But I think he would do really well an inside linebacker. But if they're not going to use him there, they might as well get something for him and not hold back other people that are behind him.
Yep.
And again, Uche, the same thing. I think he's shown a lot of promise, and he's just kind of caught behind some of those veterans. So by having him, having Van Noy released, I think it has really helped what his potential may be for next year.
Yeah. And then the thing with Uche too is he was productive. The first 2 games he had 3 sacks, and it was showing what we saw and what we heard in training camp and mini camp that he was taking that next step. And I don't know if it was just he was still playing hurt and just didn't come back fully healthy, or if they just didn't trust him putting it in. But he had pretty much no production after that. So it should be interesting. And then you do bring up a good point on Van Noy. He wasn't good the first 6-7 games of the season, but the last half of the season he was very, very productive. So I know I was assuming they were going to be releasing him just because of the salary cap situation, but if they're not able to fill that production with Uche or anyone else, then that might be a big loss.
Going next to defensive tackle, so basically the big guys in the middle. How would you grade how they played this year?
I would give them a C, and I think that might be a little generous. I'm giving it because Barmore was just absolutely unstoppable. He was playing like a top 10, top 15 for a first round pick. And he was showing the promise that people were saying he potentially had out of Alabama. But other than that, Godchow was horrendous, minus a few games here and there. Lawrence Guy was inconsistent. He was bad the first half of the season. The second half of the season, there were some games he played really well. Other games he didn't play well. So their run defense also had some good games, had some horrendous games. So it was just inconsistent all the way around. I think some potential cuts, Devon Godchow, Lawrence Guy, and Henry Anderson. I'm actually surprised they haven't released Henry Anderson yet. I would have thought that he would have been one of the first people gone this offseason. They signed him, but he didn't play all year because of injury. I believe if they cut him, it's a $2.7 million in cap savings and only 1 million dead. For Godchow, if they release him, it's 5 million dead, 5 million cap savings. So I could see them either keeping him, releasing him, or extending him, just based on that. I don't know if he's worth a $10 million contract next year, but I don't know if they want to have 5 million of dead money on the caps for him. Then Lawrence Guy, it's 3.7 million if they cut him for savings and only 750,000 for dead cap. So I think with that, they might consider releasing him, but I know he is one of the leaders on defense. They brought him back on a cheap deal. So they might want to keep him for his upside, for the promise that he showed this year, and just that locker room leadership, especially if some of the other players leave as well. So I think any of those 3 could get cut. All 3 might, but I think at least, I don't know. It should be interesting to see what happens the next week or so.
Yeah. I think you're kind of close to the grade. I'm going to give a C minus.
Yeah. I was deciding between those 2.
Yeah. I was deciding between D plus and C minus. I think Lawrence Guy kind of came on towards the beginning part of the second half, or the late part of the first half. Devon Godchow was not good for most of the time here. He's very overmatched at the nose tackle, and they have to kind of bench him and put him to the edge, and that's not what you're paying him that much money for. And I don't think he'll cut it here. I don't think he's sized enough to play the position that they want. I don't think he can 2-gap that well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's cut or traded. Henry Anderson, I'm also surprised that they haven't cut him yet. I am also kind of hoping that they don't, because he did show some promise before he got hurt. He was actually the best person on the line in the beginning of the season. And they weren't actually even playing him that much. And I kept on calling for him to play him. And then they started, and that's when he got hurt. So
Yeah.
I do have some hope for him. I think he is replaceable, though, that you may be able to get someone at a cheaper rate, because he's kind of just the guy. He's nothing special, but I think he's pretty decent in the run game. I'm hoping for a bounce back year for Lawrence Guy, even though he is aging.
Yeah. And then just one thing on Godshall, which I know we brought up during the season, is it might just be he needs this 1 year to learn the system, where we saw the same thing with Danny Shelton, where he was pretty horrendous his first year. And then after he had that first year under his belt, he actually was very productive after that. So it could just be something like that, but I'm not too optimistic.
Yeah, I'm not either. After even seeing him the remainder of the year, he just didn't seem like he could cut it. Going next to outside linebacker, I think I already kind of touched on it, just because it's kind of tough to say if they're the edge or outside linebacker. Van Noy being released, I think, is not surprising, just because the way that the reports are. They are trying to look to get faster, which we've been calling for the last couple of years. They need faster linebackers to compete in this league. And then potential free agent is Jamie Collins. I don't anticipate them bringing him back. He did look like he lost a step or two, probably more than a step. He doesn't look like the same player like he was 3 or 4 years ago. So it should be interesting to see what they do there. They do have a lot of players in-house that can kind of fill this role. So I wouldn't expect them to go out in free agency and go grab anyone for this type of position.
Yeah, I agree. I think Van Noy, he was productive in the second half, especially. So, like I said, his loss might be, if they're not able to fill that production, it might be a big loss. But it was a little surprising just because, like, given he came here on a cheaper deal and he has that leadership, but I also kind of was expecting it just because of the cap salary or the cap hit that, and the potential cap savings. I agree completely with Jamie Collins. I think he's gone. He had some production here, but he's definitely not the same player he was before. We can get into I'll just move on next to middle linebacker and just talk about all the linebackers in general. And then we can talk about who's coming back next year and why they might not need to make as many moves this offseason as some people are saying. Middle linebacker was just inconsistent as well. I'd give C- D+. They weren't effective in the run game. They got exposed in the passing game whenever they were thrown at. So it was just not great. Dante Hightower definitely lost a step. Juwan Bentley was good in the run game, but he's not really a good coverage linebacker. So I think this upcoming offseason, Hightower, Bentley, and Harvey Langley are their free agent linebackers. I think Hightower is gone. I saw that he wants to come back. I don't see the Patriots bringing him back unless it's on like a Troy Brown deal where it's like veteran minimum and he just plays sparingly, maybe some pass rushes here and there. Juwan Bentley, I could see him coming back. I could see him gone. I think it just depends on what his market looks like. A lot of teams don't really pay for middle linebackers, run stuffers, and that's pretty much what his role is on this team. So I think if a team's going to overpay for him, I don't see him back. But if he's not getting much interest, I could see him back on a sort of cheap deal.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Hightower is not going to be back unless he takes some very low contract. Bentley, they do like him a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is back. But if the salary does go up, I don't anticipate them overpaying for him. I don't think it's something that they value enough to bring him back in. So they should have some new faces at the middle linebacker position. So kind of just talking what they have coming back. Raekwon McMillan had torn his ACL in training camp. He showed a lot of promise. They liked him a lot. It kind of showed why they re-signed him in the season before it even got to this point, because they want to bring him back for next year. And I do suspect he'll probably be winning the green dot. He'll be the one leading the charge, assuming that everything goes well with that ACL. But I would suspect it would. And he is at least before he was rather had some speed, and that's something that they've been missing. And we kind of been talking about. They need faster linebackers, and he kind of fits that bill. And then the other big,
he's young too. I was surprised at how he's only 26. I thought he was like approaching 30, but as long as he's able to come back from that injury, I think
Yeah.
he can definitely be a contributor.
Yep.
Sorry,
And
just
then,
wanted to add that because I was surprised at how young he was when I saw that.
yeah, no worries. And then Cameron McGrone was their fifth round pick. He was going to be a second or third round pick if he didn't tear his ACL in the previous season. So they got a pretty good value for him, and he should show some he did show some promise back in college. So he's got some speed as well too. So I think the two of them together, you'll see them in the middle of the field, and I don't think they really need to go signing someone or trading for someone. I don't think they need to kind of go out the box for it. So between those two, you should have enough. Realistically, I think Chase Winovich should not be traded, and he should also be a middle linebacker, but I don't think we're going to see that. So
yeah. One name that a lot of people keep forgetting, and I honestly forgot about until I was preparing for this, was Anthony Jennings. He was their third round pick in 2020. I know he didn't see the field this year. He didn't really see it much in 2020 because of injuries the last couple of years. But when he did see it, it wasn't too productive. But some things to forget, or a lot of people forget, is Hightower wasn't good his rookie season. It took him a couple of years to really get into the mold. So it might just be that maybe this year he finds his niche or finds his role on this defense. But like you said, with McMillan and McGrone, they have some young, fast middle linebackers. And then Uche, if he just takes that next step like we were hoping he does, if they keep Chase Winovich, you have some young linebackers on the team that do have some speed. So they might not have to make a lot of moves that a lot of people are saying. There are some intriguing free agents out there. One that actually does interest me a little bit is Leighton. Is it Leighton? Is that his first name? Yeah, Leighton Vander Esch.
Mhm.
He's the linebacker from the Cowboys, where he was a second team All Pro as a rookie, but he's just inconsistent the next 3 years. So he was released, or he wasn't re-signed by the Cowboys, so he's going to be a free agent. If you're able to get him on the cheap, he might be someone that Bill might be able to get the most out of. But I don't want to overpay for him. Another name that seems interesting is Bobby Wagner, who was released by the Seahawks. I don't think he's going to be in the Patriots price range, but if you're able to get him on a cheaper deal or a 1-year prove it deal, he might be an interesting option as well. But those are really like the only ones that really stick out to me. As let me see if there's, and then there's Jordan Hicks, who was cut by the Cardinals, but I think he's going to be outside the Patriots price range too.
Yep, all good points, except for the Anthony Jennings. I don't expect much from him next year, unless he changes position. I don't think he's fast enough to play the middle linebacker position in the NFL. If he was like an edge player, maybe, or some sort of line, but he's not fast enough to be a linebacker and have coverage. So
that's what we said about Dante Hightower, though, his first 2 years. I remember saying the exact same things.
But
so
he still
you
isn't
never
fast
really
enough,
know.
though.
I said the same thing about Hightower here.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But, we'll have to see how it goes. All right. Going to the next position, cornerback. We can kind of lump them all together, outside and slot. This I would give them a B minus, and that may be generous. Probably mostly due to JC Jackson, how he played this year. So I'd say Jackson obviously was their number one corner, played the best. Jonathan Jones was their number 2 corner, even though he played slot. I think he was the second best talented. He's your best coverage slot corner, best one in the league, and until he got hurt. So he had he didn't have a great year in stat wise, but it's a very tough position to play slot corner. And then Mills actually did better than I was expecting, but that's not saying much because I wasn't expecting anything at all from him. So I think between those, they weren't bad. And I think Jackson kind of made up for some of the lack of promise. And Jackson, as we know now, he wasn't tagged by the Patriots, and the reports were saying that they probably weren't going to tag him. They didn't value him at that $17 million price range. They couldn't get a trade partner to try and tag and trade him. So they ended up having to just let him walk away and see what happens. I don't suspect that he'll be back. I think even though there's a lot of reports, a lot of teams don't see him as a top 5 corner. It only takes one team to overpay, and that usually is what happens. would it shock me if he comes back to the Patriots where he doesn't see the market that he's looking for? It wouldn't surprise me. We've seen it with McCourty. We saw it with Hightower. We saw it with Dave, especially David Andrews last year, where he was thinking that he was going to get this huge contract, and he thought he was going to get it from the Dolphins, and no one gave him what he was looking for, and he had to kind of come back with his tail between his legs, and I'm glad he did. But we do see some instances where not every team values someone the way it is. And I don't think he is a top 5 corner. I think he's a very good corner. I just don't think he's one of those lockdown Gilmore type of corners. I think he's kind of more of a product of the situation he's in. And we kind of saw that over the last couple of years where he's had to be the number 1 guy and there's a number 1 receiver and he sometimes gets burnt a little bit. So he's not to say that he's bad, but I think he is a definitely number 1 corner, but he's not one of those top 5 guys.
I agree completely. I pretty much with everything you said. My rating was a B- as well, mostly because of Jackson. I think the Jonathan Jones injury this year definitely hurt them a lot because he is the best slot corner in the NFL. He's also their fastest defensive back too. So some of the games where they got burnt, it was Isaiah McKenzie in the slot where he was just too fast for whoever's covering them. But that's someone that Jonathan Jones would have been able to shut down, not only just with his coverage, but also his speed too. I think Jackson played well, but he was inconsistent the first 6 weeks of the season. Then the last couple of games, he wasn't great either. So I don't think he's going to be back. I'd say 97% chance he's gone. Only way is if other teams don't value him. But I think he's probably just going to get a huge contract, probably from the Chargers, just because they're trying to go all in. And I don't think he's going to be back. Jalen Mills, I thought he played well considering. I don't think he's a number 2 corner, especially in this type of defense, but he played well because that's the position. And that's the position he had to play, and he played well under the circumstances. Miles Bryant was pretty good, except for a couple games, like the Buffalo game where he was just getting burnt. So we'll have to see what happens. I think Jawan Williams, he's going to get cut, is my guess. I hope it doesn't happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if Jonathan Jones gets cut either. Given their depletion at the cornerback position, it definitely would be a big pain for them since they're probably losing JC Jackson, but he has a pretty high cap number this year, and it is crap. I just had it. Dun, 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 dun.
I think one kind of solution to that I could definitely see them doing is too if they just extend him.
Yeah,
that would definitely
I could see that happening.
Lumber, and he's the type of player that they like. So
yeah, it's a $7.7 million cap it this year, and they save 5.7 if they cut him. So I don't think it'll happen, but I wouldn't be shocked. But I really do like Jonathan Jones, and I think he's a very valuable member of this defense. The free agency for cornerback after JC Jackson and Gilmore isn't that great, so I don't see them going after anyone big. A couple names that just stick out there are some aging cornerbacks: Chris Harris, who's almost 33, Xavier Rhodes, who's 32, Patrick Peterson, who's 32. So there are some like big names, but I think they're kind of past their prime. One interesting one I wouldn't be shocked if they go after is bringing back Justin Coleman. He's played pretty well after the Patriots traded him a few years ago. He just played with Miami last year, so I don't think he'll be a big contract. He might just be someone that they might be able to add some depth at the cornerback position. And then I think if Miles Bryant just continues to progress, I don't see him as an outside cornerback, but if he can be your second slot corner on the other side of Jonathan Jones, I think they might have some pieces to work with going forward. But having Jalen Mills as your number 1 cornerback next year, if they don't do any big things in trade, free agency, or draft, is kind of scary.
Yeah, I think they will probably draft someone. This draft is supposed to be very high in cornerback talent and with wide receiver talent. So watch
2 positions that Bill doesn't draft well.
Yeah, I was gonna say watch, they won't even draft either of them. So, but it's supposed to be very kind of stacked with corner and wide receiver. So it wouldn't surprise me if they draft someone in the first round if they're not able to get Davis at all. And it'd just be interesting to see how they kind of fix this. I could see them piecemealing this together with a draft pick, And who knows, maybe Gilmore may come back where maybe his market isn't that great because
Yeah.
maybe Jackson gets all the money and maybe Gilmore might come back at maybe 12 or 13 million. And I would be probably more comfortable doing that than
Yeah,
paying
me too.
Jackson 4 or 5 years guaranteed. Where again, you also have to consider what's going to happen when he gets paid. Is he going to kind of shut down? How is he going to act? And he did have those issues back with the first college he was at, where he was basically kicked out of the program. So,
I think that's for off-field issue, though. I don't think it was attitude.
yeah, but he's just having issues overall. Is something I don't think he'll have any issues, but just knowing that he had a past
Yeah.
may scare some people off. So, we'll have to say. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't hate a Gilmore kind of swap where he comes back and
Yeah.
gets a little bit less than what Jackson's getting.
I agree.
All right, moving on to the safety position. I think this one, I'll let you go first, and then I'll discuss.
I'll have to go with. I'm going to go with A minus. I thought the safety was their best position on defense this year. Both or all, sort of all three spots, because all three of them played like 85% of the snaps.
Mhm.
Where Adrian Phillips was your most dependable player on defense this whole year.
Mhm.
Kyle Duggar, he was a little inconsistent the first couple of weeks, but after that, he really took that next step that we were expecting. McCourty definitely looked like he lost a little bit of a step. He still was productive. He was still one of the leaders on defense, but there were some games where he just, I don't know if it was like 4 or 5 times where he just took the wrong angle and either
Mhm.
missed a tackle or missed a coverage and then allowed the other team to get a big gain. So McCourty is one of the free agents this year. I do expect him to be back next year as well. I expect them to prioritize re-signing him. But if they aren't able to, I think that there's still enough depth where you have Phillips and Duggar coming back next year, progressing another year. And then you also have Josh Bledsoe, as I know he was a late round pick, but they do think very highly of him. It's just last year he wasn't really able to see the field because of injury, but B, he had 3 really good safeties playing in front of him.
Mhm.
So he might be someone that can fill in one of those roles.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'm pretty close. I'm going to go with the B plus, just because the way that the defense played, I don't feel comfortable giving an A to anyone.
Yeah.
But Phillips, obviously, he was one of the best players on defense.
Yeah.
Most well-rounded, could really do anything. He played. There was some crazy stat, but how many different positions he played, where he played, and it was kind of like
LT.
an LT sort of situation.
I think he lined up at every position except defensive tackle.
Yeah. So he's a kind of that Swiss Army knife player and did really everything well. Duggar, I think, took a step forward this year too. I think he's getting so close to getting the right reactions. He's just, I think, thinks a little bit too much still, and I think that just comes with time because you got to think he's coming from a D2 school. I think he's gonna have an even better year next year, where he's gonna kind of trust what he's seeing and not kind of think so much and just react. And I think he'll have an even better year next year. And then McCourty, like you said, I think he lost maybe a step here, took some weird route sometimes. He was still a pretty good player though, and he's definitely the leader of the team. So I would like to see him try and bring him back and have that kind of voice for the Patriots. So overall, I think the safety was probably one of their better positions, like you said.
Yeah, I think that along with running back is the strongest position on this team.
Yeah. All right. Going to special teams really quick. I would say I would give them a C. And that maybe that's mostly just because of Nick Folk bringing them up. If Nick Folk was not on this team, they'd be getting an F or a D. Because punting was not good this year. Jake Bailey had a very bad year this year. I'm hoping it's because of injury, and not because of, I don't know what else it would be, lack of talent or lost something or what.
Yeah.
And then the special teams play in general, the amount of block punts they had, all of the penalties that they had, they just were not in the right spot. And I'm actually surprised they haven't brought anyone on board to kind of help, or that they're not using, what's his name?
Judge. Joe Judge.
Judge as like a special teams kind of helper.
He might consult, like even though he doesn't have that position, he might
Mhm.
help out the special team
Yeah.
coordinator. But
I'm hoping he does just because they looked very poor this year. Nick Folk, obviously, he was automatic. Anytime he was up there, as long as it's less than 50 yards, you expect him to hit it every single time. And I think he did. I don't think he missed any
he did.
kick under 40 and under 50.
It's either 55 or 56 consecutive.
mhm. And then the Jake Bailey situation. I know we've been predicting since October that he would be cut and then they would draft Matt Araiza. By the amount of news and press that Araiza's been getting lately, I'm less confident of that happening now. I am starting to think they may extend Bailey now because of that cap hit he's going to have. He's going to have a huge number this year for a punter. I think he's going to be the highest paid punter in the league.
Yeah, I think it's around 5 million total.
Yeah,
where they'd get 4 million if they cut him.
so
it's 4 million total. Only 72 million dead if they cut him.
Yeah, so I do suspect that they'll probably end up extending him. If they do have the opportunity to draft Araiza in a reasonable round, I would see them hitting it. I can't imagine them willing to spend anything more than a 5th round pick on him, unless Bill is eyeing him to be the kicker of the future as well. If he is, I could see him go for a 4th round pick because that's where Gostkowski was picked. I don't foresee him picking anything higher than that. And, some teams go a little crazy with special teams, but what are your thoughts?
So I have to agree. Nick Folk was an A+ this year.
Mm-hmm.
He was just completely automatic. And even the 50-yard kicks that he missed, there was the Tampa Bay game where it hit off the upright, where giving the considerations, the length and everything, I wasn't expecting to be anywhere close.
The rain, the wind.
Yeah.
I know when I was there, it was downpouring at that point. The rain started again at that point. And everyone was wondering what the hell was going on because the guy doesn't go out for 50-yard kicks. And you're saying was a 57 in the rain.
Yeah.
It just didn't make any sense. And it still doesn't make any sense. And I still think he should have trusted Mac to get it. But that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah. But Nick Folk, I know he missed a couple extra points here and there, but for actual field goals, he was completely automatic. And he's a free agent this year. I really hope they extend him. I don't see he's going to be 37 or 38, so I don't see another team paying a lot for him. I think he likes it here. Mm-hmm. So I think if another team offers a little more, I think he'd take the hometown discount. If he does go, though, I don't feel confident with Quinn Nordine as my kicker next year. So we'll have to see. Jake Bailey wasn't good this year. Even for kickoffs, he wasn't really that good either. He was okay, but he was inconsistent. I've been big on Matt Araiza since October. I'm sticking with it. They're taking him in the 3rd round.
Oh,
the end of the 3rd round, or maybe early 4th. I don't see any way he makes it to the 5th round. I think before this, I was expecting Bill to take him in the 4th because I didn't think there's any way that he'd make it to the Patriots in the 5th. There have been punters that have gone in the 3rd round, most recently in 2012, the Jaguars punter. Granted, the Jaguars picked him over Russell Wilson. But that's not really a good thing. But Todd Sauerbrunn in the 90s went in the 2nd round. And I think just Matt Araiza's talent is just once in a generation, where Ray Guy was a 1st round punter and he's a Hall of Famer, and Bill loves Ray Guy. I feel if Ray Guy was available in the 1st round, Bill would have taken him. So I think that Bill values special teams more than any other team. It's just, is a team going to overdraft Matt Araiza, considering just seeing his highlight reel or his punt on the combine? I know the NFL tweeted out his punt from the right hash all the way to the left sideline for a 55-yard punt, but that wasn't even the most impressive for me. There was one where he was punting from the 20, so it would have been snapped from the 32-yard line, I think. And he punted it all the way to the 2-yard line, bounced, and then stopped at the 4-yard line. So his kicks are just unbelievable. And I know some of his kicks in college that were long kicks, they didn't really have hang time. They were line drives, but he was having them in the combine of 6 seconds here or there hang time. So I made the prediction the Patriots were going to draft him. With me, you'll learn this. I stick with my predictions until I'm proven wrong. So I really hope they go after him.
All right.
Just a couple of potential just special teams cuts. Cody Davis, I think if they cut him, they save 1.8 million, but was rated the best special teams player in the NFL. So I don't know if this year, I don't know if they'll end up cutting him because Bill loves special teams, even with the cap savings. And then I really hope they don't cut Joe Cardona. I think they could save a little over, I think 1.8 million if they cut him as well. I just got a Joe Cardona jersey, so I really hope they don't cut him. Then Matthew Slater is a free agent, but I completely expect him to be re-signed.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree there. Now just moving kind of very quickly, news around the NFL. A lot of news breaking the last day or two. Aaron Rodgers signing a $200 million 4-year contract with the Packers, which is insane. Russell Wilson being traded to the Broncos, Carson Wentz being traded to the Redskins, and then Khalil Mack being traded to the Chargers. So I'll give a little kind of soliloquy quickly over this and get your kind of reaction. I think Rodgers going to the Packers is absolutely asinine for the Packers. You don't go paying. He's a career loser. You know, the fact that he won one Super Bowl is, I think, amazing in itself. But he's not a winner. He's a loser. You're gonna get the same kind of walk and dance with him all the time. He may even do it after next year, where will I come back? Will I not? Well, what do I value in life? I would not want him as a quarterback. I would have sold high if I were them. I would have traded him and trying to get 2, 3, 4 first round picks for him and see if you could, because there would be someone willing to pay that. And I think they completely mismanaged the asset of him. Russell Wilson to the Broncos, I think it was pretty smart for the Seahawks. He is 32. They are trying to rebuild now. I think if they hit well on those picks, I think it'll be good. And I think a change of scenery will help out for him. I know he had an off year last year, even before the thumb injury. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how he rebounds. Was it just a 1-year thing, or is he on the downtrend? He's a smaller quarterback, so it could be the instance where maybe he might be on the downturn. But he is 32. It's not he's old for a quarterback. So should be interesting to see how that happens with the Broncos. And then Carson Wentz, the Redskins. I think he's also he's a life loser. I think he's not going to do well with the Redskins or the Commanders, or whatever the hell they are. And I think it was smart of the Colts to bite the bullet and say, well, this isn't going to work. He's not our quarterback of the future. We got this wrong. We gave up a first round pick for him. But, we're at least we're not going to stick with him because we spent that much. We know he's not the quarterback for us. I think that was actually really smart for him. I do suspect that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to go to the Colts now. I think it makes sense for him. It's a dome team that do need a quarterback. I think that will really help them out. I think he kind of fits what they're trying to do there. And then Khalil Mack to the Chargers. I think, like you said, they're trying to just kind of gain up on resources, and should be interesting to see what they have. I think they have a lot of cap space too.
Yeah, they had 70 million before they got him. So I expect them to go after everyone. Or they had 70 million before they got him and before they re-signed Mike Williams.
Yeah.
So they re-signed Mike Williams too for a 3-year, $60 million deal. I just think I'll start with Khalil Mack versus. I know the Chargers are one of the most talented teams in the NFL, but I think their coach is just such an idiot that I think it's going to be tough for them to miss the playoffs this year just based on all that talent. But I don't see them winning at all. And then we saw Bill shut down Justin Herbert the 2 times that they faced him. So even though Justin Herbert is an immense talent, I don't know if he has the mental capacity to fully read defenses. So just going off on a tangent there, but I think Khalil Mack, I don't know what he has left in the tank. He only played 7 games this year, had 6 sacks. He is getting older in age, but if you put him on the other side of Joey Bosa, that is pretty difficult defensive line to go up against pass rush. So that should be good for the Chargers, but we'll see which Khalil Mack really shows up, if he's still the same player of old or if he's taken a couple steps down. Aaron Rodgers, I think the contract, I know Pat McAfee was reporting that it isn't 4 years, 200 million, but until we know what it actually is, I'm just going forward with Rappaport's report that it is 4 years, 200 million. I think that's just asinine if that's the case. I understand why the Packers did it. If I was them, I'd probably do it too. I know he is a career loser, but you have to think of the alternatives. It's so tough to win in the NFL. And for having a team that you think is right on that championship edge, especially with the NFC getting worse and worse this year, I think you kind of have to just sell out and try and win a Super Bowl the next 2 years while you have your chance. It's sort of like with the Patriots, where people were thinking they should have sold out to with Tom Brady, and you could have argued they even did towards the end of his career. I think they had to. It's just unfortunate that they had to pay that much if that is the case, because they're gonna, once he's gone, whether it's next year or the year after, they're gonna be tough to, probably not gonna be able to be competitive for a couple of years. I know my boss, he texted me after that night saying, "Crap, Aaron Rodgers is returning. We're probably gonna have to deal with this every offseason until he retires."
Yep. And then the other thing too is the amount of cap trouble they're in right now this year. They're going to have to push this further and further down the road, and it's going to come one day. You're going to have to pay the piper. So and
the good thing with them, at least on that line, is the cap is supposed to explode in the next few years with the TV deals. Right now, it went up from, I think, 190 or 188 to 208. And then there were some rumors that either 23 or 24 is supposed to go all the way up to 300 million. So it is supposed to go up exponentially. So if it does, that could help them a little bit, but we'll have to see. Russell Wilson, I think it makes sense. I think it's a pretty good trade. The Seahawks are getting 2 first-round picks, including the 9th overall pick. And then they're getting Noah Fant, who's a good tight end. And then they're getting Harris, who's a good defensive lineman. And then Drew Lock, they at least get a body at quarterback, but I don't think he's their guy. I thought they would have gotten a little more for him. I thought they really would have gotten.
I thought they got 2 second-round picks too.
Yeah, 2 second-round picks, but I thought they would have gotten at least 3 first-round picks. But I think everything considered, I think it kind of works out for all guys. Denver is missing a quarterback. I still don't think he's going to push them over to the top. I think the Broncos are still the 4th best team in that division, but at least brings them a lot more competitive. And then Carson Wentz to the Redskins or the Commanders. I don't get that at all from the Commanders' point of view. Like, I understand, I applaud the Colts for A, getting rid of him, B, getting something in return, C, getting another team to completely take his contract in full, and then not only get something in return. I thought they would have had to do like a Brock Osweiler trade where you trade him in a second for like a 6th or something like that, just to eat the contract. But they got 2 third-round picks, with one of the third-round picks becoming a second-round pick if he meets his playing incentives. And they're just taking his entire contract. I don't understand why. I don't think Carson Wentz is that much better than Tyler Heineke. I don't think Carson Wentz is that much better, or even better than Jameis Winston, who's a free agent, who's cost you a lot less financially and draft pick wise. I don't think he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Granted, you probably would have had to trade more for Jimmy, but I just don't understand it at all. Fitzmagic, I think, he's inconsistent, but I think he's probably better than Carson Wentz. So
I would take Fitzpatrick over him.
Yeah, I know he's coming back from a tough injury, so I don't know if he'll ever play again or be the same. But
it's just watching him. He's not a winner. He doesn't know how to play the position the right way, and he's the biggest baby in the world. And every place he's gone, he's not done well. He doesn't have the maturity level needed to be a quarterback in the NFL. And I don't think they'll gain there. And it seems like the Redskins are just trying to get other people's junk at quarterback every single year and try and make it work. And that's not going to work. So,
all
right. So that kind of wraps up what we're looking to talk about this week. We will kind of come to you maybe next week if there's any major news along the NFL with free agency, Patriots. Don't suspect they'll be big players, but who knows? Well, we've been surprised before.
Possibly next week if there's any major things. If it's a slow week like we're expecting, we might hold off till the following week.
So, and then this rest of the off season, we'll probably be doing it every other week podcast, unless something breaks, then we'll kind of cover it. But we'll see how much news there is going around. So thanks again for listening. Again, follow us on @Pats300 Level Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe, rate, and review. Have those 5-star reviews that really helps us out. Make sure you subscribe. and then especially on YouTube as well. Like those videos. So thanks again. We'll look forward to talking to you next time.